Hello, welcome to those who haven't been here before. Welcome back to those who have watched before. Thanks for coming again. My name is Leah Langley, and we are here to discuss the November books that I read in 2024. I read 5 books in November 2024, all kind of covering different things, but all pretty good, honestly, I'd say. I planned on doing this video earlier in the month, but then I was fighting for my life sick last week, and then this week I just was like busy and had other things going on. So finally sitting down to kind of talk about these 5 books. So as we do, let's jump right into it. So the first book I read in November 2024 actually was a book that was on the book club that I help administer, I guess, called Private Revolutions by Yun Yang. Yun Yang actually she's a economist, and she's a newly elected MP, member of parliament in the UK. I remember I looked her up, I was like, is this the same author? Like, she just was elected in the July 4th election, so very, very new. But let's read a synopsis on this great book of hers. A sweeping yet intimate portrait of modern China told through the lives of 4 ordinary women striving for a better future in a highly unequal society. While serving as the deputy Beijing bureau chief of the Financial Times, Chinese-British journalist Yun Yang began to notice common threads in the lives of her Chinese peers. Women born during China's turn towards capitalism in the 1980s and 1990s, who, despite the country's enormous economic gains during their lifetimes, were coming up in deeply entrenched barriers as they sought to achieve financial stability. The product of 7 years of intimate, in-depth reporting, this transporting and indelible book traces the journey of 4 such women as they try to make their lives better for themselves and their families in the new Chinese economy. June and Suyi are among the few in their villages to graduate high school. Each makes her way to Beijing. June as a young professional and Suyi as an entrepreneur. Like Suyi, Leia lives with her grandparents in their village while her parents send money home, yearning for a different life than those of the women she sees around her. Leia soon joins her parents in Shenzhen as an underage factory worker. Born to an urban middle-class family, Sam is outraged when her eyes are open to poor treatment of workers and becomes a labor activist, increasingly under threat by the authorities. As the women grapple with government policies that threaten their businesses, their children's access to education, their choice of where to make a home, and in Sam's case, their lives, a vivid, damning, and urgent picture emerges of the previously unseen human cost of China's rising economic tide and the courage and perseverance of those caught in the swell. So when I first read this synopsis, and also I saw it on a couple of months ago on the New York Times list of like best books of the year so far, I was like, oh, I could see why this sounds excellent, and it sounds like so engaging and enticing, and I was so glad that we read it for our November pick. And this is my little thoughts, and I kept it pretty short. I didn't really want to say, well, I could have said a lot more, but I didn't say too much, but we'll maybe talk a little bit more about it in this video as I serve these as. Anyways, my review of it says, Private Revolutions is a great and intimate look at modern China from the perspective of 4 women, each different with their own histories and challenges. All are striving for more and facing various barriers. This book comes from an economist, but the choice to tell these stories this way was interesting and unlike typical economic texts. So it was interesting because typically, not that I've read a bunch of like econ type texts, I probably haven't really read one like an actual econ text since like maybe high school, but it was interesting kind of talking about the wider economy, but looking at specific kind of examples, especially women. I feel like it's always an interesting thing in a place like China. You know, they were talking about in the book some of the policies that I had known of about like the one-child policy that they've gotten rid of, and some other things that kind of like you would see women not really progressing or not even being born in some cases because for various reasons. So it's interesting kind of seeing each of these women's lives who are very similar in certain ways, but also very different in certain different challenges, and as they're trying to like, you know, China booming, even in specific examples, talking about how when they had the 2008 Beijing Olympics, how they had a big boom of like money flowing in and like training people how to teach English, all these types of things, but how that actually affected the people on the ground and like what it looked like. One person actually ended up becoming like an English like tutor to some people kind of through that program, and it's just various things that are discussed in there and kind of laying out the situation there. And it was good as well, I think, to focus on like just focusing in on China, because especially hearing it, sometimes you read things about places that maybe from people who aren't from there. We'll talk about maybe that a little bit in one of the other books potentially, but I don't know, I feel like it was just a good thing to kind of, obviously she could have, as a economist herself, she could have written a book that was like just a bunch of facts and figures, and this is how this trend has been, that trend has been, but it was like a like I said in my review, and as the kind of synopsis says, an intimate look, looking at these women specifically and kind of tracing their lives and kind of piece together their lives in a way in terms of how the economy influences what's happening with them. So, excellent book. Like I said, as you can see there, I gave it a 4 out of 5, a strong 4 out of 5. I thought it was just so good, and yeah. And in general, I'm interested in reading more. Well, I won't even go into this right now, but I'm interested in reading more books about economies, particularly the ones that I live in. But one of China's obviously is important for the world because they're one of the big powers in the world. So, great book. Definitely recommend it. All right, the second book I read in November 2024 is Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. Sally Rooney, I've read several of her books now. I think the first one I read was Normal People, and then I don't even know what the other books are called. I need to remember. Normal People, she wrote The Conversations with Friends, and then like Beautiful World, Where Are You, I think it's called. Yeah, Beautiful World, Where Are You? So I've read all of those. I know she's obviously had some more, but those are the 3 I've read so far, and then Intermezzo was the 4th one we add on. And her writing style, Sally Rooney, if you've read Sally Rooney at all, she writes so interestingly, and I feel like she tells these stories about humans in a particular kind of way. And let me just kind of jump right in and actually read the synopsis instead of blabbering on too much. But here we go. An exquisitely moving story about grief, love, and family from the global phenomenon Sally Rooney. Aside from the fact that they are brothers, Peter and Ivan Kubek seem to have little in common. Peter is a Dublin lawyer in his 30s, successful, competent, and apparently unassailable, but in the wake of their father's death, he's medicating himself to sleep and struggling to manage his relationships with 2 very different women. His enduring first love, Sylvia, and Naomi, a college student for whom life is one long joke. Ivan is a 22-year-old competitive chess player. He has always seen himself as socially awkward, a loner, the antithesis of his glib older brother. Now in the early weeks of his bereavement, Ivan meets Margaret, an older woman emerging from her own turbulent past, and their lives become rapidly and intensely intertwined. For 2 grieving brothers and the people they love, this is an interlude, a period of despair, desire, and possibility, a chance to find out how much one life might hold inside itself without breaking. Beautiful last line there. And jump right in with my kind of thoughts on it. Another Sally Rooney book finished, as I mentioned already. Intermezzo follows brothers Peter and Ivan. Peter is in his 30s and a successful lawyer, while Ivan is in his early 20s and starting to live life as an adult, particularly after the death of their father, which sends each brother into a whirlwind in different ways. Peter self-medicates to get by and struggles through 2 relationships with Sylvia, his first love, and Naomi, a college student. Ivan is a competitive chess player and awkward loner, the antithesis of the older brother. Ivan meets Margaret a few weeks after his dad passes. She's an older woman with a troubled past. I usually have to give a little synopsis before I put my review because, anyways, all of that looks up to actually what I said. The 2 of them become quickly intertwined and connected. We not only follow these 2 grieving brothers, but how their grief and their tensions affect the people in their lives, particularly the women in their lives with whom they're involved. I thought the book was just fine. And yeah, honestly, I probably could have skipped all that, but I thought the book was just fine. A lot of times when I have more to say about kind of like the synopsis of it is usually not a great sign. But there's a lot in this book. I mean, I don't think I've given a Sally Rooney book to this point. I don't think I've really given anything higher than a 3 or 3.5 that I read. I do want to read Normal People again because I like the series so much. And I kind of read the book. I read the book for the series, but anyway, I'm getting off track here. But these 2 brothers, to me, they weren't necessarily likable characters. Not that you have to be likable for me to like the book, but it was kind of just like they were problematic with each other, with themselves, and particularly kind of with the women that they were engaged with, essentially. So it kind of made it like some of the things were just like off-putting, certainly, and in general. But I do think Sally Rooney has, like I said, kind of already has an interesting way of telling stories about people and kind of like going through that type of thing. So I'm going to continue to read Sally Rooney books because I feel like they're interesting and they're engaging enough. But like I said, I thought it was just fine. The new Sally Rooney. If you were a Sally Rooney reader, read it, pick it up, do your thing. But that's my thoughts. So, which is not too many thoughts, but there they are. And we'll move on to the next. All right, the third book I read in November 2024 is actually a book I got a few months ago. I think I got this. It's called The Women by Kristen Hanna. I believe I bought this book in August. I had heard about this book. Someone mentioned it on The View, which is a talk show. They mentioned this and had it as like one of their book club reads or whatever. And then I was in the store and I saw it and I was like, oh, this is the book and I've heard such great things. So let me pick it up and buy it. So then I bought it at the beginning of August, but then I never actually read it. And I was like, let's pick it up and actually get to reading it. And I really liked it. I really, really liked it, actually. I believe I gave it, I'll have it here in the video, but I gave it 4 out of 5. So yeah, let's jump right in and talk about The Women. So the synopsis of it first is, from the celebrated author, forget that, and I can go, yada yada. Women can be heroes. When 20-year-old nursing student Frankie McGrath hears these words, it is a revelation. Raised in the sun-drenched, idyllic world of Southern California, specifically Coronado Island, which that is my favorite place in the world to be. My family's from San Diego, and Coronado is where I would spend a lot of time. Anyways, sheltered by her conservative parents, she always prided herself on doing the right thing. But in 1965, the world is changing, and she suddenly dares to imagine a different future for herself. When her brother ships out to serve in Vietnam, she joins the Army Nurse Corps and follows his path. As green and inexperienced as the men sent to Vietnam to fight, Frankie is overwhelmed by the chaos and destruction of war. Each day is a gamble of life and death, hope and betrayal. Friendships run deep and can be shattered in an instant. In war, she meets and becomes one of the lucky, the brave, the broken, and the lost. But war is just the beginning for Frankie and her veteran friends. The real battle lies in coming home to a changed and divided America, to angry protesters, and to a country that wants to forget Vietnam. The Woman is a story of one woman gone on tour, but it shines light on all women who put themselves in harm's way and whose sacrifice and commitment to their country has been too often forgotten. A novel about deep friendships and bold patriotism, The Woman is a richly drawn story with a memorable heroine whose idealism and courage under fire will come to define an era. So yeah, even just the subject matter. I'm looking here. I actually wrote a lot for this review, so we're going to just read the whole thing. But 1965, Vietnam, there's a lot there, even just from that alone. So let's chat. So my kind of thing is that I said was I quite enjoyed this book. It quickly became one I wanted to tear through and didn't want to put it down. Very quickly, I was like, let's just get through this book quickly because it was quite good and quite engaging. Early on, I could see this book as it was a TV series or a film as I was reading it, not just because the main character is from Coronado and a little winky face there. And I was talking that quickly. There are some books that I read and I could picture it in my head, but this one very vividly, like very quickly. Sometimes it takes a little bit, but this one very quickly, I was like picturing, okay, she's walking on the beach, or she's like getting off the chopper, yada yada. Like I could see it playing out, and I wouldn't be surprised if this book was one that became a series or a film or something like that. It has great qualities. All right, here we go. The Woman follows Frankie. We first meet her in 1965 when she was 20 years old. She comes from a family with long lines of service. Her father, who was unable to serve, even has a hero's wall at his home to honor past servicemen. I say servicemen in particular. Frankie decides to go to Vietnam with her brother and becomes an army nurse. After basic training, she lands across the road and is immediately smacked with the realities of war. It is a war being reported very differently in the U.S. media, and rumblings of dissent are growing louder and louder and will continue to do so. We track the protests through the letters that Frankie's mother sends her. I'm going to keep going, but you really start to see how different, and obviously we know now, and we're this in 2024, we know about the Vietnam War, and we know about kind of like what was happening there and how the U.S., the presidents at the time weren't really like, all types of crazy stuff with the Vietnam War. I'm sure you guys know. If you don't know about it already, then I'd encourage you to do your own research. I'm not going to go into it all now. But the way we kind of Frankie starts to basically learn about some of these things and like, why do they say only this happened on the news when I'm here right now and we had like 50 deaths or whatever, and it's like, you said there's only 4 yesterday? There's just not, all these type of things. And her mother's writing these letters to her as they're corresponding, and kind of like, it's crazy to hear people are protesting, people are yada yada, but Frankie's not fully realizing what's going on until she actually lands back home. Anyways, moving on. Frankie here becomes a kick-ass surgical nurse, best friends with fellow nurses Barb and Ethel, and has her first experiences with love. Through her mother's letters and the trauma of what her daily life is like, constantly see Vietnamese civilians and young boys die, young like service members, And knowing that the U.S. is going to continue to send more boys to their death, Frankie is traumatized. She is brave to be there, but truly broken and lost. But things do not get easier when she lands home and truly is affronted with the reception she receives, being literally spat at the airport. America is divided over the world. Many people want to forget it, her family included. Most of the book, about 60%, is in the post-war period. Frankie struggles to navigate through a myriad of things, her service not being believed. Women weren't in Vietnam. She would go to the VA and try to get some help, and they'd say, "This is for Vietnam vets." And she'd be like, "I was there." And they didn't really believe her. The overt and subtle misogyny she faces even from her family, relationship trouble, substance abuse, it goes on and on. Through it all, her relationships with Barbara and Ethel shine through. They are quite the tour de force, both in Vietnam and out of it, supporting each other, Frankie most of all, in a myriad of ways. I can say more, but I want to avoid spoilers. I will say that early on, I felt as I stated that this book, I didn't want to put this book down, which often indicates that it will be a high rating for me, 4.5 or 5 stars. However, towards the end of the book, I was just like, Frankie girl, get it together. Obviously, she was dealing with deep and untreated PTSD, but some of the decision making was just insane. Around one person in particular, my face after reading chapter 28 was a mix of, and like, if you read this book, please comment, but don't, or message me some way, because after chapter 28 of this book, after chapter 28 of this book, my mouth was just on the floor. I remember my sister came in and saw me reading it and was just like, my mouth was just wide open. Anyways, I didn't expect that. Also, just men are horrible. That one in particular, horrible. Anyway, the final few pages of the book and what happens at the war memorial were like, okay, this wasn't necessary, give it a break. So the ending for me, the ending few chapters, or big chunks of the ending few chapters, did not give way to much of the other parts of the book, but that's just me. And that's what lowered my rating to 4 stars. I still recommended this book by far and wide, as it tackles such an interesting time in American history, and for once centers women in it. So yeah, I was fully prepared reading this book. I was like, okay, again, like I said, when I have a book that I want to just like tear through, I'm usually like, okay, this is one I'm going to probably rate highly. I'm going to just like get through in like a bunch. But then the ending for me, not necessarily like I said, the last few chapters and stuff was kind of just like, all right. And also Frankie, it was like we gotta get it together, girl. Come on now. Like, let's get better here. So that's what had my rating lower, as I explained. But still, there were some highs and lows in this book. Some very interesting things happening in this book that really had some great reactions out of me. And I would definitely recommend this book. I think it's a great one. Actually, when I bought this book, going back to that, when I bought this book, I picked it up and I was like reading the book jacket copy. And a woman came up next to me and she's like, "Oh, my friends are reading this book. I'm pick it up and get it." I was like, "Yeah, I was thinking about it," and then we both bought it together. So if you're ever happening to be watching this, I don't remember what your name was, if we even exchanged names. I read the book. If you read it, let me know what you thought about it. I thought it was pretty good, and I definitely recommend it to everybody. All right, next book here is the book number 4 from November 2024 is The 100 Years' War on Palestine by Rashid Khalidi, and the kind of subtitle is A History of Settler Colonialism and Resistance, 1917 to 2017. This excellent book. Let me just read the synopsis first, and then we can go into a little bit more. A landmark history of 100 years of war waged against the Palestinians from the foremost U.S. historian of the Middle East, told through pivotal events in family history. In 1899, Yusuf Daya al-Khalidi, mayor of Jerusalem, alarmed by the Zionist call to create a Jewish national home in Palestine, wrote a letter aimed at Theodor Herzl. The country had an indigenous people who would not easily accept their own displacement. He warned of perils ahead, ending his note, "In the name of God, let Palestine be left alone," unquote. Thus, Rashid al-Khalidi's great-great-nephew, begins his sweeping history, the first general account of the conflict told from an explicitly Palestinian perspective, drawing on a wealth of untapped archival materials and the reports of generations of family members, mayors, judges, scholars, diplomats, and journalists. The 100 Years' War on Palestine upends accepted interpretations of the conflict, which tend at best to describe a tragic clash between two peoples with claims to the same territory. Encyclopedia's traces the 100 years of colonial war on the Palestinians, waged first by the Zionist movement and then Israel, but backed by Britain and the United States. The great powers of the age, he highlights the great powers of the age. Say that sentence a little bit better. He highlights the key episodes in this colonial campaign from the 1917 Balfour Declaration and the destruction of Palestine in 1948, from Israel's 1982 invasion of Lebanon to the endless and futile peace process. Original, authoritative, and important, the 100 Years' War on Palestine is not a chronicle of victimization, nor does it whitewash the mistakes of Palestinian leaders or deny the emergence of national movements on both sides. In reevaluating the forces arrayed against the Palestinians, it offers an illuminating new view of a conflict that continues to this day. And as I said, this book was from 2017. It was published in the beginning of 2020, but it is such an excellent book. Let me give you my thoughts on it, my quick little review on it that I wrote. Anyway, this is a book that should be required for all. We are in need of more Palestinian voices. So many people are telling their stories, and I believe that is one of the reasons why some people's perceptions of the Palestinian people are so off. I think of Ta-Nehisi Coates' book, The Message, which I just read, I think in October, and I did a video on that as well, if you'd like to see that. I think of his book, The Message, as he speaks about this very phenomenon. I'd heard of this book before, but I, like many of us, have thought about it again after the ongoing events since last year. It is important to know that nothing started last year, and this book points that out. I saw someone put this book as illuminating and depressing, and that is true. Clearly details meticulously how we got here and directly points to events or people who were instrumental in continuing the suppression and subjugation of the Palestinian people. I saw someone else say that this book is a deeply human yet academic and critical look at Palestine and their oppression and resistance. I cannot recommend this book enough, and there's more that can be said, but it really is a book that everyone should read. Excuse me. So yeah, it's hard to even talk about this book. Not hard to talk about this book, but it's one of those that I don't even want to. I think it's one that should be read and you should just read it completely. Like, obviously you could pick things out of here and you could talk about it endlessly, but there's so much in here. I feel like Khalidi did such an excellent job of walking you through step by step. Like, this president was in office here and he hired this person and this person caused this to happen, or this in Britain the perception changed and this prime minister and whatever and did these things and starting to kind of form all the way back from 1917, like forming, like, again, like I said, how we got here and what decisions happened when and what perceptions change when and all these types of things that I feel like sometimes, so oftentimes, get lost and are not actually spoken about. And especially, I heard about this book, like I said in my review there. I heard about this book. It's a very lauded book, but in the past year, I thought about it again, and I bought a copy for myself, and I'm so happy I did. I'm so happy I read it. And especially, like I said as well, it's so important, I think, that we have more Palestinian voices. We don't have as many in the spaces that they need to be to talk about the issue. I wouldn't say the issue. To talk about this subjugation and oppression from their perspective. So to have this book from Khalidi, to have him walk you through it in this way and to give you a full kind of looking from their perspective and kind of giving that is just so valuable and so excellent. And I feel like it's something that people need to read because, like I said, so often we are not hearing from Palestinians themselves. Even as I mentioned, Ta-Nehisi Coates in The Message, which I would recommend you reading that as well, the last third of the book or so is about his trip to Palestine and kind of basically getting the veil off of his eyes of, thinking it was going to be one way and going there and being smacked with a completely different reality. And he was saying how he thinks part of that, well, his reality was kind of different, was because he was getting his information from non-Palestinians or some people who were on the other side of the conflict or whatever, and kind of being like, and basically when he actually went there, was able to kind of wrap his mind around it in the actual way that it actually is. So this is like a history textbook, honestly. And it's so excellent. Like you said, you get stuff from personal family situations. Like, for example, in 1948, when there was a big conflict there. I forget what they call it. I don't want to say it wrong. say it wrong, but examples of his parents were out of town studying, like were studying in the United States, I believe, and they couldn't come back after because their home was no longer there, or having to, have his grandparents leave their homes because they had been taken over, all sorts of things. Again, just like coming from family perspectives, been coming from reports, coming from other people who lived there, people who were used to be maybe empowered in certain ways. And also, like you said, he just does not shy away at all from the other kind of national movements that have come about on either side, and talking about kind of what they did, but also going back into like the retaliation and the scale of retaliation and things like that we are seeing now and have been seeing for the past several months. It's so excellent. It's so excellent. I really recommend you reading this book, telling anybody you know about this book if you haven't read it. First, read it for yourself, and then tell everyone else you know about it, and just continue to pass it on, as I will do so. Absolutely. And as always, it has always been this way for many years. It is Free Palestine over here. All right. Book number 5 for November 2024, the last book of November, is For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough by Ntozake Shange. Let me just read the synopsis first. In celebration of its highly anticipated Broadway revival, Ntozake Shange's classic award-winning play centering the wide-ranging experiences of Black women, now with introductions by two-time National Book Award winner Jesmyn Ward. Oh, Jesmyn Ward, she wrote a great book called, I think, Let Us Descend a couple years ago that I read. Excellent. And Broadway director Camille A. Brown. This copy that I read, I had just a Kindle copy. It was like some year anniversary special one, because that's why it's a couple new things. So, anyway. From its inception in California in 1974 to its Broadway revival in 2002, the Obie Award-winning For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough has excited, inspired, and transformed audiences all over the country for nearly 50 years. Passionate and fearless, Shange's words reveal what it meant to be a woman of color in the 20th century. First published in 1975, when it was praised by the New Yorker for encompassing every feeling and experience a woman has ever had, For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough will be read and performed for generations to come. Now with the new introductions by Jesmyn Ward, Broadway director Camille Brown, and one poem not included in the original here, it is a complete text of groundbreaking dramatic prose poem that resonates with unusual beauty in its fierce message to the world. So this book, I had considered reading this book, I don't know, like a couple years ago when I got older, kind of. There is, I'm trying to see what year this movie came out. There's a movie on it that actually is talked about in this intro, because it's like a new copy in 2010 that Tyler Perry did with a whole bunch of, I wouldn't even go down the list of actors, but these excellent actors. It came out in 2010. I saw it in 2010, but I honestly feel when I saw it in 2010, I was too young to really get it. I was too young to get it. And I haven't watched it again, but I do want to watch it again to kind of, with a new set of more adult eyes. I was an adult at that time when I saw it. I didn't even know at the time that it was, I knew it had a source material, but I didn't know that it was a play. I didn't even really realize it actually until I was reading the introduction, and I was like, oh, this was like on stage. And you very much get that, because when you're reading it, it's if you read it, if you see it, it's like, okay, this is not like a typical type of text. This is like something that is performed, and that makes me wish I could see it on stage somewhere, to see it performed in some way. But that's why I'm eager to watch the movie again. So let me read my thoughts on it. Much can and has been said about this work. It feels too rare to have pieces like this that center on Black women and their experiences, which I appreciate. It is presented with passion. I wish I could see this performed on stage. That's really how I felt, because obviously you're reading it and you're tracking it, but it's one of those things like so many different voices, so many different women. I would so like to have seen it performed. Actually, maybe we'll try to look up to see if there's like a YouTube performance of it or something like that. If I could find like some type of video of it, because I think it's excellent. And yeah, I definitely recommend. This is one that many people should read. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the movie again, and kind of maybe coming at it with like I said, adult eyes, and it's kind of, because it covers a wide range of things. If you've seen this movie, if you read this book, it is nothing for young kids. And I didn't see it when I think I would have seen it when I was 14, I guess, or 15, depending on what month it was. But I have to be older, I think. So reading it this time was more like, okay, and now again it makes me want to investigate more and kind of see it performed in a particular kind of way. So, all right, that is November 2024 books. 5 books we went through. Like I said, all great books, all ones I'd recommend. The most of all, I'd recommend 100 Years War in Palestine. But yeah, we will look forward to coming back in December to talk about books again. We're getting through a few already. I probably will not talk about books again until, I guess, January, because we're not going to put anything out before I finish reading everything. But yeah, as usual, send me recommendations. We're coming into 2025 shortly. I need more recommendations, so drop those below. If you've read any of these books, let me know below. Particularly if you've read The Women, like I said, after chapter 28. If you've read it, message me or comment to me discreetly or something, because I want to talk about that with more people. I need to find more people who've read this book, because chapter 28, after that, I was really just like, what are you talking about? This is crazy. Anyway, I can keep going into it more, but I'll cut it short. We've been here long enough. So thank you guys so much again for watching and making it this far. I look forward to seeing you guys in my next video discussing who knows what, but thanks for even tuning in at all. And yeah, have a great one. Bye-bye.